right away with our VC panel. So I'm just going to introduce all of our guests for today. We have Hill from 7X Ventures, Hugh from YBB, John Allen is joining us once again from BitDAO, and finally Jeff G comes from Foresight Ventures. So we are still waiting on a few guests, but I think today we can start off with the question for today. The first question for today is given the rise of how do you DAOs and DAO funds such as MetaCartel, Moloch DAO, and more have changed and will change the traditional VC model? So I'm just going to open up with that question to all of you. Some of you have prepared answers beforehand, so please let us know. Just go ahead and raise your hand and speak. So Hill, would you like to begin with your what do you think about DAOs and how DAO funds have changed the VC model?
Yeah, the way we see how DAOs are shaping basically the VC space is that overall it's making VC investments more competitive in a lot of ways. So previously, say for example, before DAOs where there are only VCs or other angel investors, typically they or us, have higher requirements for projects, such as, you probably need to have some existing revenue, you probably need to have all the future plans laid out. But then when DAOs come along, things become more flexible in a lot of sense. They're in a lot of times DAOs are more willing to invest into super early stage and probably invest more into personal founders. And overall, we think that makes the market more efficient, so that talents gets discovered more easily and more efficiently. And therefore, it also means that the pricing of talents and early stage projects are more efficient. And therefore, if you are a talented founder and then living in today's space where DAOs are actually competing with VCs in a traditional sense, chances are you have more choices. And therefore, basically, I think the overall impact will be that VCs, as we know it previously, will be kind of regressed, or there will be a regression back into where VCs belong, which is financial services. Ultimately, we are providing financial services, and beyond money, we hope to provide a lot more value for our investments. And I think that's what DAO really brings into the space, is that more efficient market and therefore more help and better environment for all the founders out there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Hill. So yeah, DAOs can create a more kind of equitable investment atmosphere for VCs in general, as well as the projects. That's one of the things that you identified from this rising trend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how about the rest of our panelists? What do you have any comments on what Hill has just said, or any other views of your own as well?
Yeah, I was gonna say happy to jump in. I agree with Hill, in that it makes it a lot more competitive. I think a lot of projects are seeking to build a community. So if you have a community investing in your project, sometimes that's an easy way to kind of bootstrap that initially. So whereas a lot of VCs are kind of smaller teams, they're working with a lot of different projects, they have a certain value add. What I think is interesting about DAOs is a lot of times they can be very niche focused. It can be a team of founders who are specifically, have a gaming background, or have a privacy background, or have kind of some background that directly lends itself to projects. So I think that it's quite competitive, and that, you can have founders of things that are actually applicable to your project, and also have kind of a much larger community. So I think because you have that larger community engaging with a project, they can do more, they have more resources, they can be more flexible. So it's actually quite interesting to see. I think the VCs are going to have to kind of evolve in a certain sense to help kind of provide some of that value add and be a little bit more kind of directly active in some of these specific niches, or hire partners to kind of fill that role. Just because if it's so easy for people who are interested in a certain domain to start a DAO and start investing, that is kind of directly up against kind of what VCs have been kind of pitching and trying to provide to projects. So it allows much easier access to builders and founders and kind of communities to directly engage in a more meaningful way with projects. So you love to see it. I think kind of like Hill mentioned, it makes everything kind of like more efficient. But I think both VCs and DAOs are continuing to kind of iterate and evolve to kind of match the current investment climate.
Yeah, John. So in your role, so you actually hold a few different roles, like as in traditional VC as well as like in BitDAO itself, like with the different sub DAOs, even connected to the BitDAO such as EduDAO. Like, do you see any differences between your roles in the two different kinds of like investment structures?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the whole reason why I kind of wear a few of these hats is because I've always seen the value add in like helping to build communities and really kind of getting down in the trenches with founders and like building, and then kind of having venture is something that's additive to that. So kind of in my previous fund roles, it was like I was doing conferences, a lot of community building, and that kind of like that's very similar to what I'm doing now. So we have Marana Ventures, which can be like asset management. It's also like venture investing. But then with BitDAO, we have this notion of kind of these autonomous entities that are like domain specific kind of sub DAOs, if you will. So we started Game 7, which is a gaming ecosystem DAO. We started Education DAO, which focuses on universities. It's also ZK DAO, which is a ZK Sync accelerator ecosystem. With all of those, it's nice because you get to work with those founders, work with people who are very plugged into those domains. And it's not like DAOs are kind of trying to take these entire rounds. Usually, like DAOs are trying to just get pretty adequate exposure. And I think that hey, if it makes sense for Marana to also add capital and provide additional value add and resources, like that's great. So I see this very like symbiotic relationship. And that I've always thought that one of the kind of value adds VCs can do is help with that community building. So having those direct kind of connection to, hey, I'm working with these DAOs, I'm working with these autonomous entities, and then I also have a fund role. I think kind of like splits the divide between those two that I think work quite well together.
Yeah, it's very interesting, like how BitDAO has like split up into all the different sub DAOs which concentrate on a particular sector. So like I'm wondering if any of the other panelists, so most of you you have experience in traditional VC models. Do you have any kind of the same direct experience also, like either investing in DAOs or directly joining a DAO yourself and having experience of that? Do any of you have that? Jeff, I see that you just unmuted yourself. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to share a small experience from Foresight Ventures because we have two interns currently who is living in New York and Beijing, and I think they're going on their education career next year. So the reason we are going to solve this problem is we are going to publish a Foresight DAO for them. For example, they are going to be the members in Foresight DAO in the future, no matter we are still in the Foresight Ventures. So we can still share the deal flow with the Foresight DAO team members, and if they want to join in the investment of the Foresight Ventures, we can use the Foresight DAO as an entity for them to invest in. And also, if they have colleagues or classmates who want to join in the crypto world, Foresight DAO is also going to be a good place to start up. So I think DAO is more easy to enter or do anything you want. So I think it's a quite easy platform for the starters.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Jeff. So you mentioned Foresight DAO. It provides an easier barrier to entry compared to like the traditional VC model. How about like for do you mean like for people who want to enter investments and then like previously they would have to join as an LP of a VP, but they can just invest directly in a Foresight DAO instead? What about like for young companies or young projects that are seeking funding on their end? How does it compare to the traditional VC model of looking for investors and trying to pitch their projects?
Yeah, it depends. So for the big DAOs, such as, for example, such as the big DAO, they have enough community. So probably the startup teams who is looking for larger community to start up their project, and they can seek the help for BitDAO. And for some startup teams who probably is looking for the connections by other VCs, they may go for the help from the traditional VCs. So from my perspective, the traditional VCs is not going to be that different from the DAO VCs in the future. So the principle we are working are basically the same. So we are a group of people who have the same goal, and we already set up the same rules for running the ventures or the venture DAO. and we finish the due diligence together, and we make the decision together. So basically, the rules are the same. It's just how many people are there, and the entrance, or is it easy to enter or start up.
I see. So a lot of the same processes, like from like the VC world, such as like due diligence, you see the same thing applying there, but maybe the way that people contribute their work, like the research analysts within the DAO itself, they might not be paid a salary, but they contribute research, and they're paid based on each individual piece of work that they contribute. Is it something like that right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a member of Foresight Ventures, when we do the due diligence, we're always looking at what is the community members is talking about in the communities. So that is also kind of the distribution, the effort the DAO members can do in the future as well. So I think that is they can involve in the investment process.
All right. Thanks, Jeff, for sharing. Tony and Hugh, would you have any other insights as well on how your respective funds have been like dealing with the rise of like DAO funds as well as like DAOs as an investment structure?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I just have a quick chat on that. I think Jeff's idea having a DAO spin-off from a fund is very interesting. We probably should do the same. But I think from our point of view, DAO is having two layers of indication. I mean, at top level, it's more like a way to organize resources, right? Trying to mobilize people resources. The second level is more like a DAO fund, right? I mean, as a VC, we are very interested to know more about this DAO as a platform, as a tool, how to mobilize more resources more effectively, and that is why we are here trying to learn. As a DAO fund, I mean, VC do club deals all the way, right? I mean, that's why we're also invested into BitDAO. We're trying to having this partnership, open partnership with as many DAO as possible, maybe even have our own DAO as well, same as Jeff. But I think that's more like a how to say a community kind of concept.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, thanks, Tony, for sharing. So I think that also brings us to the second question for tonight. So as VCs, how would you consider investing in DAOs where the token ownership tends to be more decentralized than traditional equity models? So I know like BitDAO, you offer Bit token. So like Bit, out of like some of the other, compared to some of the other DAOs, is still based on a traditional liquidity model, but some other DAOs like Moloch DAO, actually they have a different kind of token structure, which comes with this like like you can withdraw your funds if you disagree with their investment decisions. So there are different structures that come with the DAO. But how, as VCs in general, how would you consider like the token ownership in DAOs?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump into this. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because I think we're seeing that, by and large, like most DAOs have more distribution of tokens to the community. I think you're also seeing this in projects as well. Like if you look at the kind of change in kind of like token cap tables, if you will, from like 2019 to 2021, you're seeing just like a vast amount more tokens going to the community because people realize that, if you give people incentive to use the platform, that's something that could be very powerful. If you're keeping a lot for kind of the team and giving a ton to like VCs, it's a bit problematic because then you really have to like bootstrap the community through other methods. So I think that DAOs just kind of take this a little bit further. You're seeing like usually like kind of 40-50% of these tokens are just kind of being distributed to the community to incentivize, kind of whatever kind of engagement you'd like. And also people are quite active. So I think it's really a benefit. The way that we think of it is like, it's very positive, that, VCs are kind of an investment piece. If you have more people, if it's doing better, if it's kind of like maybe a smaller piece, but a much bigger pie, the numbers work out quite well. So I mean, I think a lot of projects do quite well because they have large communities, and if this token distribution can help kind of bootstrap that and make it happen faster, we're extremely supportive of it. So love the model, and I don't think there's kind of like any issues with kind of the token allocations that we've seen.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And actually, like a lot of argument right now, especially in the Solana ecosystem, is that a lot of the tokens built on top of Solana have large like VC allocations, and then it seems like as the unlocks happen, the tokens just dump. So like Serum, Radium, there are some examples of this. There are others, but these are some of the more prominent ones. Like people criticize them for the price just dumps as the unlock schedule moves forward. So it seems like it's more of a problem on Solana compared to some of the other chains because of the tight VC allocation of the tokens. So I wonder like if anyone has any opinion on this, like whether it's more advantageous for the tokens price to be decentralized, so like to prevent dumping, or not. Yeah. So like.
All right.
Hugh, Tony.
Yeah. Because we are a early investor in Solana, so probably should try to explain that. Well, I think what you have said is true for certain projects, but as an ecosystem, there will be different kind of projects, right? The token price, I think that the nature of that is about value creation. How do you capture value, right? And now it's early days in the industry, so I think the value is yet to be created, and people are basically buying a non-profitable projects or business or shares because they believe in the future, right? And that is why people bought the Bitcoin in early days. So I think having a large VC brand to endorse and basically bring a lot of credibility, belief into their projects, people will buy into. I think there's nothing wrong about that. But it doesn't say you have to have big VCs in order to build credibility, and that is exactly why community-driven projects like People, SOS, right? They are grassroots, they are bottom-up rather than top-down. They are also getting very popular. So there's just no right or wrong way to do business. But I think as long as you can build in the trust and credibility through either A or B, then I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, definitely, Tony. So I guess it really depends on the project per se. Like Solana itself, the unlocks haven't been as much of a problem for Solana token itself, but sometimes it seems that at least for some of the protocols building on top of Solana, this unlock schedule problem has been like commented on like quite widely in different circles, like whether or not like earlier investors, even though the price has dumped, it's still a massive profit for them, and then they even as their tokens get unlocked, it's still a good financial decision for them to sell it off for additional liquidity. Any of the other participants, would you have anything to share on like how you view traditional equity models versus like token investments models in DAOs or like in projects in general? Hill,
Yeah, I can probably jump in here. Like, regarding that, a lot of times, coming back from a traditional financial background, the way we see equity investments, a lot of sense, if your company is listed, if you're an early investor and you hold this amount, every time you want to sell, if you have a pretty large amount, you probably have to do a public announcement, wait for the board's approval, etc. And then obviously in DAOs, I don't think for now there are specific requirements you have to follow. Like obviously if you want to sell, just go to Uniswap and just dump everything. However, the reason that things are changing is because obviously everything is transparent now. on chain. And then obviously if you dump, people will notice. And then that, depending on how much you dump, and obviously depending on what projects you're dumping into, that can give a certain impact to your reputation. And then obviously for a lot of the early investors into a project, it means for them that there's this risk and reward they're now trying to take, right? You get the reward of exit liquidity, you can dump on some people, however, the risk is massive. And then so for us, for 7X, the way we exit our portfolio, obviously we are a fund, we're still trying to make money. The way we exit our portfolio usually is that we go to the team and say, hey, look, this is the reason we need to sell by this certain date. Either our previous fund is closing, or this is the amount that's basically required by our investor. What's the least harmful way for us to do so? Whether we do it on a stretch the whole dumping through a month, or we talk to some OTC opportunities, just basically be very general, be very sincere, open to the community, open to the project team, and say, hey, look, this is what we have to do, and what's the best way to do this? I mean, communication and the way you facilitate this is always more beneficial than, you keep it in a secret and then you just dump certainly on the market.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Hill. So yeah, there are ways that VCs can use to exit their position more without making as much of an impact on the price. That's very insightful as well. So I'm wondering if any of the other panelists today have any views on like token prices and early allocations to VCs in general. If not, then we can. Oh, okay, yeah. Please go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah. Sorry. I agree. Like what Hugh said. Like VC withdraw their position. It's like list marketing. It's like there is a balance of what we try to help in the early stage of project, broader team, and how to accelerate learn. And then this is just like we withdraw our our accelerator. And the main thing I'm most interested in, like a DAO, the venture DAO, something is, and the token price. What is a balance? How to design like a structure that can generate when you like this market, there is a bad news from the market from American side or something, or a Chinese government. So there is always have you real product, your community, and not creating the community that pull you price up. It's like a two-side game. Yeah. So we seeking the DAOs to build the price market. This is what we're looking for.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying that So like first of all, you agree with what Tony said regarding VCs want to exit their positions because as early supporters of these projects, in helping to build a community, in helping them gain some gain a bit of reputation with VCs investing in the projects. You want to see a return.
It's not just like a reputation or something. That is early stage. It's our insights, our view to the future. We trust the team and we support them in the starter. With not just funding, we also invest in other resources with them. So at early stage, and when they be the explosive, they be the massive one. So we just withdraw a little bit, but we are not just think there is just a fully withdraw. We just exit our position, all fully as position. We can continue to, but as a funding team. Ventures, they always it's honestly to have some withdraw their position.
I see. So it's to create some liquidity in your positions, like realize some of the gains in the fund, rather than like seeking any malicious purpose.
Yeah, because there is like we always people thinking there is like a lot of position in VC side. This is the truth, but there is like always they are blaming the market has been dumped by the bigger position, bigger ventures, something. But this is what will they do? Like Coinbase, like A16Z, they have like withdraw a lot. But who is this is the real world. This is the market. We need to respect on. But they really did a lot in the early
thanks a lot. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Like as early investors, you want to realize some of the gains for yourself. So yeah, thanks for sharing, Hugh. So I think let's move on to the final question for tonight. So some critics of Web3, such as Jack Dorsey, claim that Web3 is just a buzzword coined by VCs, which leads the same centralized model as Web 2.0, where the majority of like the protocols and projects are owned by VCs anyway, rather than a decentralized model. So what are your thoughts on this statement, and how might Web3 still be decentralized with the presence of VC investments?
Yeah, so I mean, I was going to jump in. I think like it's kind of to some extent it's a valid critique. I think there's some truth in a lot of these critiques, and so I think like just as a Web3 kind of community in general, you should look at these pieces and say, hey, this doesn't apply to everything. Obviously, this isn't kind of this blanket statement that isn't true, but there are some components to this. Most of these critiques are coming from certain data points that people see, and so I think we should continually strive to kind of like fight against that. In general, I think what I've seen is that a lot of these kind of things that are just kind of money making, like very VC owned, they tended to not really grow community, and they've been really kind of hyped, but then they kind of faded away. Or the VCs have kind of like ended up selling some tokens, and then the community has gotten proper exposure to it, and then the projects do quite well. So I think that in the long term, this problem will kind of rectify itself. If you have something that's like 90% owned by like 2 or 3 funds, what's really kind of the incentive for a lot of people to use it? I think it's going to be harder to grow a community long term. So I think these things have a way of working themselves out. I think that it is like, a valid criticism for some kind of certain data points. So I would just say like take it in stride. Obviously all of us being so plugged into Web3 know that this isn't some valid critique, and just completely writing it off probably doesn't make sense. There's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of kind of good actors in the space. So I think focusing on the positive, realizing there's some critiques of the negative, and trying to kind of overcome those hurdles, and hopefully kind of move toward a better model and a better community in general.
Yeah, like I often see like the Ethereum maxis who always criticize some of the other alternative L1s like Solana. They say Solana is the majority of the tokens are owned by VCs or early investors, and that makes it less decentralized than Ethereum. So I guess like it's also true to some extent what they say, but on the other hand, there are other metrics of decentralization where Solana performs quite well on those, and in general, like right now, with the gas fees on Ethereum still rising so high, a lot of new projects are popping up on Solana, which don't even have VC funding anyway. So it's on its own. That's also a form of decentralization as well. That's what I just witnessed online anyway. So I'm wondering like if you or any of the other judges have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, but just really quick, and then I'll stop talking. Like I think in general, like decentralization is a spectrum. I don't think you're ever gonna get to a point where like, wow, this is perfectly decentralized, like this is the model, right? Like it's something you continually strive to do. Like even something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, like there are a lot of things that could be done to make it more decentralized. There's some large holders, like you look at like kind of the distribution, and it could always be better, until it's like literally like one person holding like one coin, or like one person with one miner, like in the entire world, like that's kind of like the end of that spectrum. And so I think what we're trying to figure out now is like where on that spectrum is acceptable. If you have like state level actors try to shut these things down, what's going to be persistent? What's going to kind of get through that? But if that never happens, maybe it doesn't matter. And maybe this is decentralized enough, right? And so I think it really just depends on like, hey, what are the macro conditions? Like what is kind of like, the government engagement in this? And then a lot of these are working quite well. A lot of them are building great communities. Solana is doing phenomenally well. And so I think kind of like this infighting is really just like debating like where on the spectrum do we think is kind of the optimal place between like efficiency and getting things done, and also kind of that censorship resistance, kind of like more maximalist view. So it's hard to say who's right or wrong right now, but I think time will tell.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing, John. So I'm wondering if any of our other panelists have any views on this. Like Hill, please go ahead.
Yeah, talking about the timeline and the spectrum, probably just want to remind everyone that 4 or 5 years ago, nobody said this space is filled with VCs. People said this space is filled with scammers, illegal people, illegal usage of crypto. And obviously, seeing the space as today, we've come a long way. And hopefully in 20 years, we'll be able to say that, this space is not filled by VCs anymore. This space is filled by family offices, or the protocols will be, the tokens will be held by, large hedge funds who has, 50-year-old fund managers. And then that'll just be a totally different place. So, the visas are here for a reason. We're here to accelerate what's supposed to get there. We just try to make it earlier, and then, support other people just building it so that you have less risks. You don't have to take on all the risks yourself. Visas are here to provide you fund, to provide you support. And, obviously, I think we're still in the early stage of Web3. That's why you see all the VCs are here. Just, probably 10 years later, we're able to see a totally different, ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Hill. Yeah, so I think VCs play a very important role. Like even in Web 2, a lot of developments wouldn't be possible without VC funding. Like let's just talking about like Apple Computer, without like VC investments to take them off, they wouldn't be able to get things running back in the 1970s and 80s. So I think VCs have a very important role in like fostering the growth of any new ecosystem. Jeff, I see. Please go ahead.
Yes, I want to share our experience. So for some Web3 communication protocols that we have invested in, so for some early start teams, they don't even have the token economy yet, and then we decided to invest in them. So basically, there will not be any problem of the decentralized of the tokens in the future. So the reason we invest in them is basically they can create the innovation protocol of communication in Web3. I want to share my experience of when I realized Web3 is quite important. Is my Twitter account was blocked for some reason 2 months ago. When I unlock it, it requires my phone number in the US and both in China. That is really annoying. So I think that's the moment I realized I need a Web3 protocol. Make everything is easy and basically easy to use. So so the reason the VCs is invest in Web3 is not only about the token. So we are trying to create the order of the future world. We are trying to create the civilization in the metaverse world. So that is what VC are doing. So we are not only looking at the money, looking at the financial readback, basically.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for talking about your experience, Jeff. So it's nice to see that things like decentralization and like not being limited by a centralized platform like Twitter, that's also a concern for a lot of the VCs out there in considering like investments in Web3. So I think that's like very important in like encouraging decentralization in despite or maybe even because of VC investments. So some of these critiques they're arguing past the point. Possibly, VCs don't necessarily have to be opposed to decentralization themselves. They can see like freedom of speech or outside of the control of any particular centralized agency as a good end on its own. So thanks a lot for sharing that, Jeff. So I think we are almost running out of time. I'd like to welcome any of the panelists to give their like any closing thoughts on this question?
Yeah, just probably very quick on that. I think either Web 2 or Web 3, right, is for people, and it's going to be run by the people. And once you have people, you have hierarchies, and decentralized, totally equal. I don't think it's possible, whether it's using Web 2 or 3. But what Web 3 is doing is giving people optionality. So if you're not happy with, let's say, Ethereum too expensive, you can go to Solana. Well, if you're concerned about Solana is not so decentralized, but you have another little solution in the future, you can go to right. So the thing is that people are basically voting using their own foot. They go to different ecosystem as they want, and this is Web3. Watch, think about this. If you're not happy with Twitter, can you go easily to another Twitter? There's none such things, right? But in Web3, I think there will be abundant of options, different chains, different ecosystem. They're competing for your attention. And if you're not happy, just go there, which is not there yet in Web2. I think that's a huge difference between Web3 and 2. And I think we're all striving to make that happen.
Yeah, that's a very good insight, Tony. Very interesting insight on how like competition itself between different protocols, different chains, that in itself is a form of decentralization. Even like whether or not you care about a particular chain, whether it's decentralized or not, that might not be the important question. It's really about whether there are alternatives completely, and Web3 offers a lot of alternatives. So I think that's a very important insight. So I think, yeah, so just reading of our panel for today. I'd like to thank all of our panelists joining us